What up, guys and girls? It is Bobby,
And Sean.
and we are back. Is this a formal we're back
Yeah, this is
episode?
a more formal We're Back episode. What's probably We're Back 4 now. That holiday We're Back last week, and I think we are on We Were Back 3. So this is
Okay,
4.
so we're back, volume 4. Um, this week's episode is brought to you guys by 10,000. I'm actually wearing the hoodie right now. For those that are watching, for those that are listening, it's a pretty sweet hoodie. Use code CronusFit15 for 15% off your order for 10,000. It helps us sponsor the podcast a little bit more, and they've graciously also sponsored one of our scholarships. So shout out 10,000. Really have enjoyed using their apparel to work out in. Really comfortable, well-fitting, very durable, better than Lululemon.
Yeah, better than Lululemon. I like 10,000. I am not wearing a 10,000 hoodie. If you can't tell, if you're watching this, I've got the Northeastern hoodie on underneath our Cronus Fit hoodie sweatshirt. Sorry, I haven't come out with the hoodie line yet, but 10,000 is just super comfortable. The shorts, I do nothing but run in them now. Lifting, I do nothing but squatting in their functional variety of their shorts. It's not the interval short, and I keep blanking on the name, like I'm an expert here, but
This session.
yeah, like super blown away by both the durability of the short and just the fit and the comfort. I've I liked some of Lululemon shorts when they were like the first to come out with that functional fitness-esque short, but the down on your legs, they didn't fit as tight as I would have liked. And that's not because I have tiny stick legs or chicken legs. So before you go jumping to that conclusion, you can stay seated. But they just didn't fit as tight as I wanted them to when I'm really getting like a nice pump on. But these ones do. And 10,000, like I wasn't much into the Instagram, and I know they do a ton of social media work. And so after they approached us and I checked them out, I was like, okay, like we'll see what they're about. We'll try some of their clothing. And holy shit, I wish I had known about these guys earlier instead of wasting money on like Lulu shorts every once in a while that I would need to up my inventory, or shirts. I mean, they're short sleeve shirts. Jesus, I am quite illiterate today. Are super comfortable. So huge thanks to 10,000 for reaching out. And again, huge thanks to them for helping to sponsor one of the scholarships going forward next year. If you didn't see our social media, we're super proud. You know, when Bobby and I started this company a couple years ago, originally it was like, if we can just generate some funds that cover the costs of running the business, that's great. But beyond that, it was enough where he and I can invest that on our own. We made enough to cover it, and we were all right. This excess that we have, we need to start developing and pushing towards nonprofit work, which we did. And then I think in our first year, we were able to donate and give back a couple $1,000s on top of the scholarship fund. And then just this past year, being able to give back $10,000, and next year we want to up that, is super humbling, because it's just everything is only happening because of our Cronus fam and because of our followers. We have a ton of free programs that are constantly available. We offer free programs every day, but it's individuals going and just, clicking that one-time fee for a $20 program here and there, that throughout the year added up to the extent that we are able to give several $1,000s in scholarships out, and then pick charities that so many of our listeners and followers recommended. So huge thanks to our Cronus fam. 2020 was a shitty year for most. But we were able to really come together and help out a lot of those in need because of you. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very, very much.
Really like what Sean said. Huge thank you, guys. Really started from the bottom, and now we're here.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been a great journey. Looking forward to seeing what the next couple of years bring to us. Looking to expand some of our program offerings. Looking to get some more apparel. Silky or Ranger Painting is going to be next, I think, for the apparel that we're going to get. So working on some other swag, maybe like a flag or something like that, since you guys have been asking for flags for a while now. But we're in the works for some more stuff to bring to you guys.
So I think going from something super positive and great and starting to show off on the opposite end of the spectrum, Wonder Woman 84.
Did we talk about this already?
I think we talked about Mulan and
I thought I'm pretty sure we talked about Wonder Woman 84 last week, that it was trash. Neither of us had watched it,
okay, so
but
yeah,
we heard it was
neither one
trash.
of us had watched it and acknowledged that it was trash through the grapevine. I uh, got HBO Max specifically for 6 months just to watch this, and then not realizing that HBO Max has all of the Die Hard movies, so it's already an investment that's well worth it. But
Mm.
for the reason of getting HBO Max, seeing Wonder Woman 84, and trying to see maybe if, a movie geek buff like me who really likes shitty movies could learn to love a movie like Wonder Woman 84. And that is a resounding hell no. That has to be one of the worst movies and genuinely bad movies I have ever seen in my entire life. Just, I don't, I, like when people watch Terminator and you're like, I don't get the time travel loop, like, if it branches off and creates a new future, or how that like interplays, and people will challenge the writing in that kind of movie, but still generally Terminator movies are good. There's such leaps in this writing that can't be overcome with either good action sequences, good acting, um, other things to divert your attention. It is straight from the 20-minute mark to whatever 100 minutes in. It's one of the worst movies I've ever seen, ever.
Interesting. That's a shame. I did like the first Wonder Woman. I thought the first Wonder Woman was pretty well done. But I was looking forward to watching this one, but now I've completely written off Wonder Woman 84 from my list.
Yeah, and it's not even one of those, oh, I've heard so many people say it's bad, I should watch it on my own. I almost wish I had not watched it on my own because it was just that awful. The first Wonder
Mm.
Woman was great. You start off with, Diana Prince or whatever, and she's on the island of the Amazonians. Chris Pine, lands there, but she's going through all these trials and, figuring herself out. And you're like, okay, like cool. And then there's like a bunch of action sequences which aren't like too far fetched, which are really, really well put together. And then it goes to like, and there's some really dark themes in there, like gassing soldiers on the front in
Mm-hmm.
World War One, a ton of people dying. This one, like, it's like they took a playbook out of Disney's Mulan, which is available on Disney Plus and just as bad. Of people might die in this, but there's no bloodshed. The violence action sequences are like few and far between. You see one in the opening sequence at a mall in Washington, D.C., and it's like the next time you see any action, it's 80 minutes later with Kristen Wiig's character where she's a Catwoman now. And that is only tolerable because Wonder Woman loses her powers to some extent. And then there's like a chase scene, but it was really bad, dude. Like awful, awful. And I don't want to like spoil it unless you want me to spoil it for our listeners or for you,
That's
but
okay.
trash,
All right.
absolute trash.
We'll chalk up this to a trash movie do not watch. You know what movie I watched the other day that probably one of my all-time favorite movies?
Die Hard.
Whiplash.
Oh,
Great
yeah, with
movie.
Miles Teller. That's a
Yeah,
great movie.
great movie.
Am I rushing or am I lagging?
Dragging.
Dragging. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a great. I think it's like kind of to try to take this discussion further on like Whiplash for those that haven't seen it. The whole premise of the movie is like you have this drummer with like a lot of potential, this young drummer with a lot of potential, and then he has this very demanding, abusive coach or orchestra leader that his attitude is you create you what you do your responsibility as like a coach is to take talent and encourage talent and to let it blossom into like becoming the best in your field or whatever. So I think it's very a very interesting take on like coaching and different aspects of like coaching and being a leader, because you can make an argument like, you know, in the military when you have guys or subordinates that have a lot of talent, and then, you know, you want to encourage them, to push them, to drive them to become better, but then where do you draw that line of becoming, you know, too demanding and too abusive versus you know, too easy and letting them slide with not putting the best effort forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was so weird seeing that done so well in a movie about a jazz ensemble.
Yeah.
Because I think it's J.K. Simmons is
Mm-hmm.
the conductor, and he's really aggressive in the way that he talks to his students. He's really offensive when it comes down to it, with his language. And I grew up playing in the orchestra, you know, through college, and I'd never ever met a conductor or music director that was that violent, that demeaning. And I just don't, I've never experienced it, so I could never say like, oh, that seems commonplace. Like you're 50-50 on that. But definitely thinking about that in the military, I think, and if you've seen the movie, you know what kind of personality we're talking about. But I think that personality we need more of in the Army today. Maybe not so much with the offensive remarks, if you've seen what happened with the 5th RTB commander being released or replaced or dropped or taken out of command. But is the Army getting softer? From when I got out to where when I got in, it definitely was. What are you seeing now? Do you think the Army needs, you know, some toughening up?
Uh, I don't know. I'm kind of mixed on it. You know, being in medcom is definitely, you know, I'm very far from the line. But it's definitely, I don't know if I would say like it's noticeable, but um, I don't know. It's hard for me to say. Just was like the, I guess like the soldiers or lower enlisted people um, in the hospital is gonna be different than like the people that you would work with on the line too. You know,
Yeah.
so like it's like a different work environment, but there's definitely, you know, like a, not like a lack of respect, but like more of a, I guess like familiarity that gets bred in medcom, because you have like enlisted like LPNs or like that work with, or medics that work with like officers like nurses and doctors. There's been a couple of times where I had to correct like a medic for like calling me by my first name, where it's like, you know, like you can make an argument for letting, you know, like medics or nurses call you by your first name, but at the same time though, like you wouldn't call your, you know, your commander by the first name in a
No.
professional setting.
That seems like a one of those like SF realm type things where you see teams that are on a super friendly first name basis. And like, is it the line of work, or what comfort level do you get to where rank is not something that is, you know, commonplace in the way that you talk to one another? Because I, you know, having just met a couple dudes from the unit, like they're pretty much on a first name basis with everyone. You couldn't really tell who's the officer or who's enlisted, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just walking around and seeing them communicate to one another.
Yeah, but so that's like a different unit dynamic and environment where you're like, you are, you know, everyone has a role, but they're in the same, in a certain lens, like kind of equal in their experience level and expertise level. But like in, you know, the conventional army and the hospital, there is definitely, you know, there is a hierarchy. And once you give off, I think, as like a leader, if you know, surrender some like maybe some of your higher, I don't know, it's hard for me to like even verbalize it, but it's like once you like give off that kind of professional, once you surrender that professional attitude that you that you have, it's hard to get it back, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think
like like once you
part of
start
me,
allowing like people to call you by your first name or to become more like friendly with you, I think you sacrifice a little bit of that professional edge where people can take you seriously professionally. Not to say that like you can't be friendly with people, but you probably shouldn't be friends necessarily with you know, a lot of people they work with, because it can create an environment where, you know, your opinion isn't quite respected, or people don't take you as seriously because you think like you know that you're just a nice guy that, won't get mad at them or won't hold them to a certain standard.
Yeah, and that can even you can extend that to small almost infractions with, some of that subordinate superior relationship stuff. Um, if anyone's been in units where, for instance, like on my first deployment, my vehicle crew and I, because we did so many convoys to where we would patrol, it's only 4 to 5 of us at a time in that vehicle. And I remember having several conversations with my platoon sergeant where he said, you don't see it because, you're around these guys every single day, but what you don't want to have happening is your relationship with them serving as a shield for them to either be, insubordinate to a squad leader or to another team leader, just, by chance of their proximity to you. And so I think some of that familiarity that you were talking about with the first name basis thing, it might be one of those examples of it potentially doesn't cross the line on really a professional level, maybe between you and that individual, but between that individual and others. Because my RTO, if he had a problem, instead of going to the weapons squad leader to talk to him, would sometimes just come straight to me. And my platoon sergeant would be like, "That's not how this works. You need to understand that the PL is a nice guy, but your weapons squad leader is the one that's your raider, and I need to make sure that when you go on after being an RTO for 18 months, you're going to be a good gun team leader or something." Or you go and you're a good saw gunner when you go onto a line squad. So that's something to keep in mind for all those PLs out there that have really good relationships with their RTOs, their medics, any kind of specialty person in your platoon. You got to look outside of just your own individual bubble and what kind of impact that has on a formation.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make. Because I know as like a second lieutenant, like, as a fresh second lieutenant, I did not think about, having about creating like a climate of like a good leadership climate. I was more, I'll admit it, I was probably more worried about being, being one of the boys and being a good
Yeah.
leader. And initially, it works out well initially because, it's like you're well liked, everybody likes you, things get done. But then after a while, it probably will lead to some detriments in the overall unit culture and your ability to get things done because, when you ask or you tell your guys to get something done, they won't take you as seriously because they know you as this nice guy.
Right.
They won't get mad at them or that won't, correct somebody for not doing things too standard or they'll know that you will let things slide because you're, friendly with them.
Yeah.
But that's like, or like, well, I would say like that's like a big army type thing where you're not necessarily dealing with people that are super motivated to put the best effort forward. I think in soft and like more selective organizations, you can definitely get away with a little bit more friendly environment
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
because
Yeah.
everybody is held with high standard.
Yeah. And it's not that environment where individuals need to be coached as much to do the right thing because as an officer especially, you're like a dime a dozen. You're going to do your 12 months to 2 years of PL time, some XO time, staff time here and there, then you're gone. And then that individual is going to be in the same squad, that same platoon, probably anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 years um, before they go on or they go to specialty platoons or they PCS. So for them, it's about doing their job the best that they can to make that organization consistently run. And it's not so much going to be based off of, as an officer, your short time there trying to implement something new. Whereas in the conventional army, the guy who filled in for me afterwards, I thought was a complete dud. And so I think in the conventional sense, there's probably some more turnover for individual talent really making a difference in a platoon. Whereas in SOF, I don't think it's as important to have maybe that like super stellar leader sitting there because the organization itself could run without you.
Yeah, but that's a common, I think, mistake that a lot of juniors, second lieutenants, or like junior PLs will kind of fall into that trap of being liked and friendly versus being a good leader and making the hard decisions.
So how would you mentor, your fire section, or, if you're a platoon leader, how would you mentor your junior enlisted soldiers that you work with on a day-to-day basis that maybe don't fall underneath, a squad every single day, to have a good relationship with you, but at the same time be motivated by something else other than your relationship to do well?
I think, especially in my fire section and like regiment, the big thing that I did was to have and to plan and hold like realistic and tough training sessions, whether that was PT once a week or having when we had some white space in the calendar, instead of like having a like fire is bullshit session where we just hung out for the day. I got some land and we did some training, and that was like tough, and as tough and realistic as I can make it with having not having resources. So I think it's like the environment that you set. Like I would have time where after like MWAT or after like a training session, I would just sit there and just bullshit with the boys. I'd buy pizza and for the boys, and we'd just sit there and kind of bullshit for a little bit after like a tough training session. But I'm not saying that you can't be like spend time with your guys. You shouldn't be like in the iron or held in like that pedestal in your office away from the guys. But you have to balance like having balance your relationship between like being a leader and then being a friend, I guess.
Yeah. And I think it's way different too if we look at garrison relationship to deployment relationship. Because on a deployed relationship, I mean, that's your family for 9 months, and you have to, uphold some sort of a dynamic that you can apply both in a combat scenario and then training back on BAF, CAF, wherever you're at or whatever cop you're on. Versus in garrison, they have their own family outside of the platoon. So it's what are you doing, on your P1, 2, 3 weeks, that's going to get them to that deployed state where they're going to be ready to execute no matter what.
Yeah, I think the big thing, and that's like a leader thing too, is that you have to, hold yourself and your subordinates accountable. And, at the end of the day, your goal isn't to be, their best friend. Your goal is to be the best superior they can be. And that means providing tough, realistic training, holding them accountable for their actions, making sure that they're the best and best trained that they can be, so that when the time counts, they're able to do their job when lives are on the line, when guys are in trouble. You want your guys to be the most prepared that they can be, because at the end of the day, like you might not be there when that time comes, but you at least can rest knowing that you have prepared yourself and your guys the best of your abilities for that future day.
That's 100% right. And that's where we kind of bring it back to the J.K. Simmons character. When I first got to my platoon, I felt like I would raise my voice when I'd be mad about something. Like, and it wouldn't just be like a day to day, like I'm going to raise my voice. If something got really fucked up, I was going to get mad and I yelled. And then the longer that I spent in like this platoon command time, the more I realized I could do the exact same thing by just keeping a more even temper. And if someone had messed up because I had consistently applied the same kind of like counseling sessions with them, that if I just went up and said like, hey, you are really fucking this up, you are completely wrong in the way you're executing, this is not the standard that's expected of you here. If you continue to do this, I assure you, your time as a squad leader will be drastically limited. That had more of an effect than me yelling at them, belittling them for not accomplishing the task that, fully should have done. And then especially when I got to regiment, it was like I I don't think I ever like truly got upset with any of my squad leaders or my platoon sergeant or team leaders or rangers ever. If we missed something, which was very rare, it was a stern talking to, but it was also looking back and reflecting, what did I not do to make sure that this was so secure that this squad leader forgot this? Was there something that I should have been doing to make sure? And so it was always looking back at myself and saying, what do I need to do next time to, even if this mistake occurs again, I'm going to make sure that there's a system in place to prevent it. And so I feel, compared to where I was day one as a platoon leader, as a second lieutenant, to my last day as a platoon leader, as a captain, I was a completely different person. And the way that I talked to individuals, and then when I went to Triple C and then eventually got to Fort Carson, I found myself like fighting the urge to go back to day one Gold Bar, because I was so angered by just the complete opposite world that I had just left.
Yeah, and I think I would probably draw the same parallel with me, and kind of like going from second lieutenant to captain, like FSO, then going to med school, and now coming back into the hospital. As not really like a senior, person, but like as a doctor, um, I definitely find myself like having to control my emotions, and not snapping at like the nurses or medics when things are fucked up, or when things are like super messed up, because there's times when like I go check on a patient and there's like stuff like drastically wrong or incorrect, where like patients aren't hooked up to IV fluids, aren't getting their antibiotics, aren't getting the proper care. And then when I ask, like, I have I have to really control my emotions and make sure that I don't snap at the nurse or whomever is taking care of this patient, because um, most of the time it's not due to negligence or something malignant. It's more so just like, oh, like they didn't get a chance to do it because they were busy doing something else. But um, that's one thing that I have tried to get better at, is to take not snap and to control my emotions again, because I haven't had to really control them in a long time.
Yeah, and examples of when I got mad, because it literally was really infrequent. Like one time on a squad live fire, my squad, who ended up having my best squad leader in it for my duration at Hood, was just executing it so slowly, like to the extent that I didn't know what could possibly be going wrong, because it was a really straightforward lane, because live fires are on a big open field. And so for the fact that they weren't getting up and moving across, these different phase lines effectively and quickly enough, it was really frustrating to see, like, you're not motivating the soldiers enough. And that angered me. Or another time, we're on a mission in Afghanistan, and all of a sudden I'm like looking around and I feel like I have deja vu. I'm in the same spot that I feel like I was in 30 minutes ago, only to realize that we had done a complete circle around this one town in the middle of the night, because I looked down and I saw the same checkpoint, this like weird candy cane pole in the middle of Maywan, and realized that my squad leader's GPS device was broken. It was really pissed off that I was not notified of that, and then was embarrassed that I hadn't picked up on it until we got back to this checkpoint again.
Mm-hmm.
Versus in regiment, like the worst thing one of my squad leaders did was forget to charge a speaker for a call out. And like how much of an impact that had on arguably what turned out to be one of the worst lanes that I ran as a PL there. That was just we executed the lane. It was not done in like, say, like a 45-minute standard. It was done in like an hour and 5-minute standard, but that 20-minute window made such a difference and was such an issue for like the BC walking my lane. Like that's the kind of small things in one organization, compared to like in a conventional sense, that would not have been a problem at all. You would have just adapted it, overcome, and be like whatever. But there's just such higher expectations when you're in soft versus line units in the regular army.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say like the one statement you made about you being mad was also because you hadn't picked up on it before or sooner
Exactly.
until it happened.
Yeah, I trusted this individual, and you should. It's not like you should never trust them. I always trust my squad leaders after you build up these relationships for months. I was upset that even if I had caught on to it earlier, I was more frustrated that I did not have systems in place where either other squad leaders were going to radio in and say, hey, at this point, 3-6, we're in the wrong spot. Or for me to go, we should have been seeing this geographic checkpoint. We're not here. Let me, radio up to my first squad leader and figure out why. It wasn't until, we got to this checkpoint again that I even started thinking of that. So I was also angry at myself for not setting conditions in my platoon where others felt confident to say something because it was wrong, or that I was not on top of the mission. And so it was like, if this had been worst case scenario and we got into contact, would I have even relayed the correct coordinates for where we were? Would I have been prepared knowing that, if we made contact near checkpoint 2, what kind of terrain features were available for us to either take cover, return fire, and maneuver? Like, that's the kind of stuff you have to think about as a leader, where small errors can have huge, drastic, lifelong consequences. And you just really have to be dialed in and not let yourself be lulled into complacency.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make about being complacency and, trusting, but also verifying.
Exactly.
I
That's
find
great.
I find
Yeah.
the same, the same concepts that applied, back on the line, I still take kind of into the hospital, where, like, I trust nurses that they're doing their job, but I also make sure I will, not be lazy and assume that everything is going right, or that assume that people are, patients are doing well, but to go to the bedside and verify that, things are supposed to be done correctly, where, the right fluids are hung, the right antibiotics, the right medications are given, that the nurses are doing their jobs and properly, caring for the patients. And I think it's the same, same idea that you have in the military, or back on the line, where, you have to trust people are doing their jobs, but you also have to have um, the motivation and the drive to verify, because at the end of the day, that's a pain in the ass. Like, you don't want to sit there and have to double check and triple check everything, because you want to be able to trust that people are doing their jobs. But at the same time, though, you can't, as a leader, you can't, always trust in somebody else. And you have to have those redundant systems to make
Exactly.
sure that things are getting done.
And that's where like PCCs and PCIs are so crucial. And if you're in a regular Army unit in the infantry, you might not have the equipment that you would even consider necessary to go and check. You're going to have your machine guns, you're going to have your saws, and that might be it really for any kind of specialty equipment that your platoon carries. But as you go into maybe wheeled or mech formations, the weaponry changes, the specialty items you carry because of the equipment loadouts that you can have varies and changes significantly. And then, in the Rangers, your mission could change every single time. And not only checking ropes, but you're checking all of maybe the gear of enablers that are going to be coming out on your operation. And so really creating a checklist for yourself will help. And I think a lot of what we've been talking about too goes back to that leader development from a personal standard. And what you said, I think, really echoes in my head as the most important part of that, is creating an image for yourself that others see as being not perfect, but near perfect. So that if you have to correct somebody, like, those who live in glass houses shouldn't be the one to throw the first stone. You need to make sure your shit is squared away and on point, because if you're about to go and tell one of your team leaders, squad leaders, or just rangers or soldiers that they're jacked up, you can't be standing there with a magazine that is upside down in your weapon. I've seen that. You can't be there saying something and your helmet's on backwards. You can't be there saying something and have just briefed a totally jacked up order, because if that's platoon successful, it's because of your soldiers and rangers. If it's unsuccessful, that's 100% on you. And so, the buck stops with you. So that's why we talk about fitness. If you're not incredibly fit and you're supposed to motivate others to want to max out the new ACFT, like, that's going to be kind of awkward if you have soldiers and rangers that are physically much more dominant than you are. And then goes back to weapons qualification. Platoon leaders are, in my view, in general, infantry officers and infantry soldiers should be experts on the M4. And shooting anything less than a 39 should not be acceptable. It's the standard in regiment. I think it should be the standard across the Army. It's small things like that. Communications, being on your radio, knowing how to operate the radio beyond just changing a channel, but being able to fill it, just your inhibitor, but the ASIP and all the other stuff that you're going to be carrying. There's like 5 pillars to just general leadership that you should be an expert on, not just being able to talk through it, but being able to execute it as well. And then that's where your subordinates will follow you to hell and back, because they understand you're there to fight with them. You're going to protect them both at garrison and on deployment to make sure that they're set up for success. And you're putting in as much work as they are in understanding their roles, so that when they're tasked to go do something, they know and have confidence that you've thought through everything that they're about to experience.
Yeah, I would say like I wouldn't necessarily say that you have to be like the most physically dominant person in your platoon or your unit. You don't necessarily be the fastest or the strongest or the best. You better not be the worst. You should definitely be at least above average, and at least better than the majority of your guys at whatever you're doing. Like you're not like from a fire's perspective. Like I wasn't a JTAC. Like I wasn't expected to be able to rattle off a 9-line off the top of my head. But when it was my turn to do a 9-line, like I didn't sound like an idiot, and I knew what I was doing. Same thing like on the range. Like as an infantry PL, like there was no, and I don't know how many opportunities you're going to be in the stag, like clearing a room, but you should at least know and look like you know what you're doing when it's training day, so that your guys can see that, hey, like the PL is pretty confident, he knows what he's doing, so we can actually trust in him and his abilities rather than do as I say, not as I do type of scenario.
Exactly. And we're not, like we said before, we're not going to talk through all the specifics of RASP 2 when Bobby and I went through together, but we did have an exercise where we did some room clearing, and even just that experience, and then getting the feedback from the NCOs that were running RASP 2, I left, if my experiences in regiment had just ended with that like 1-day period of going over room clearing and the drills that we had done, I would have been a much better soldier for it than had I, never even served in the 75th. So every single day you have to think that there's something that you should be doing and learning. If you're a platoon leader, and I was guilty of it when I got to the hood, because I really didn't know any better. I thought, okay, there's some basics. I can shoot expert. I know the basics. I can rattle off a 9-line. I'm really fit, and I can brief a really good order. I really wish I had spent more time in my arms room learning about not just knowing what the effective ranges were for weapon systems, but being able to put them all together, take them apart, the maintenance that goes into it, learning more advanced communications equipment that are, commo techs had to constantly be up on top of. So if something went down before we were getting ready to, head out of FOB PSOB when we were deployed, I maybe could have troubleshooted it instead of waiting for, the E6 to come down from the company to tell us, oh, it's just this simple toggle that you should have switched. So I think I watched a documentary on submariners, and how even the officers that are on these boats, there's this big like couple hundred task list that they have to go through. Every single sailor on that boat has to go through it to just show general competency at every single level in every single compartment of that ship, from the firing to fire safety to medical stuff. I feel like you should come up with that as a platoon leader in whatever organization you are, and look at the weaknesses that you have, and when you have free time, figure them out, because at some point they're going to come into play, whether you're in command later or whether you're going to be OCing a lane and you need to tell somebody that, that deficiency and that level item check that you had done as a PL would have made the difference in that situation. And so just don't sit back and say, okay, I'm good at the 4 basics of an infantry PL life, but your life as an infantry PL makes up such a small fraction if you do a 20-year career, and all those other smaller things will put together and be a much more benefit when you are in a position later in life.
Yeah, I think it's a great point to make about, not sitting back on your laurels when you have some free time, and like trying to fill the time with something that is going to be productive. And it might not be productive or beneficial for you for, years to come, until you don't realize that this was a skill that you picked up that was, that you didn't think you needed to know, but it then became useful in the future. the classic saying, like putting your rucksack for later, like that's that's totally applicable to everything that you do. That the skills that you learn or that you pick up in your free time, which might not be applicable in the current moment, you never know in the future when that becomes super applicable or can actually make your life easier or make you successful in the future.
Yeah,
So it's like
I mean,
thing that I like in the hospital, things that I do is like, I try to be independent in terms of if something is like I can at least do kind of the basic nursing tasks, like hooking up fluids, like giving IV, like putting IVs in, things that like if I don't have to ask a nurse to do, that I can kind of do myself and then just tell a nurse I did something, because one, it makes their lives a little bit easier, and then two, honestly, it makes things go smoother and just because things get done at a sooner time.
yeah, you talk about small stuff that you guys do. I remember we were at Bagram and like medical training. I feel like it's not overly complex for that first line care when you're on the battlefield. Everyone thinks, oh, I can put on a tourniquet, I'm done, good to go. But like, how many people have practiced putting in an IV? Have you practiced that under some sort of strenuous condition, in the dark, under nods, under red light, trying to find a wound? So at Bagram, we did this huge event where it's just like, you're just going to practice sticking people over and over again. And the extra room that we had in the platoon bays was literally, the floor was covered in blood. I mean, it looked like something out of Blade. And I remember the BC walking in and he just did one of these, like, and just shut the door and backed out. Like, what the hell did I just walk into? And then later that night, we're in the bunkers, people are under, red lamp, and we've got, our very experienced team leaders and squad leaders literally getting in people's ears so they can't think, just making like sounds like, eh. And this guy has to think, going through the checklist for sweeping for the wound, and what is he going to address first with the airway, where's the massive amount of blood coming from, and how are you going to stop that bleeding, what kind of wrap or tourniquet are you putting on, and where. And I was like, I need to go through this too. Like, I feel like I can look at a patient and say all these things out loud in my head, like, this is what I would do. But until you actually get down and do it, and you start fumbling, and you realize maybe that your kit isn't set up in a way that is going to be successful in combat, it's those small things that are like, all right, I need to put this pack on my right hip now, because if I'm kneeling over a ranger or a soldier, that's where I'm going to be able to get this piece of equipment out to save this individual's life, or to prevent further traumatic injury. So whatever training you're developing to, you need to be able to go through the ropes with, and not just talk about.
Hold on, be right back. I've got someone at the door real fast. Keep talking.
Okay, cool. This will be Sean's hour. All right, guys, with Bobby gone, I want to go back to Wonder Woman 84. Spoilers are going to follow. So we find that Diana Prince wishes that Chris Pine's character comes back to life. And he does, but he does so in the body of another person. Now, this doesn't make any sense, because every other person on the planet who makes a wish through this wishing stone essentially has delivered their wish at the price of something, to their detriment. For Diana, it was her powers as an Amazonian and as this goddess. And so that's why throughout the movie, she looks physically different, less vibrant, and less of the Gal Gadot that we've come to know and love. So what was really weird about this wish sequence was when she desires Chris Pine to return to her, instead of it being just like every other wish that's in the movie where it just pops into existence, this was the only wish where it was like, oh, we're taking the life of somebody that was already around, like whether or not he had a family, a backstory. It's completely overlooked. And so if she had just listed, I just want $10 million, that would have showed up in her living room. And instead, if we were consistent with our first wish, the $10 million should have like been turned into 10 million in cash from like her pet dog, and her pet dog totally just ceased existing. So that was a huge plot hole for me that I really disliked about Wonder Woman 84. And Bobby's back, so hey, man.
What were we talking about? Sorry, our neighbor was at the front door.
Well, I was just talking about plot holes in Wonder Woman 84 and what kind of trash writing it was.
Oh, the point that I was getting, where you were saying about, you have to get and do the medical training. The point that I want to make is like, you should be able to I feel like leadership is like it's like a one-way street, where you should be able to do everything that's you expect of the guys beneath, like your subordinates. You should be able to do what they can do, but they can't do what you can do.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the attitude that any leader should have, is that, you should be able to, if you're expecting someone, you're like one of your subordinates to do something, you should also be able to do the same thing. And I think that's like a kind of the crux of being a leader, is that, you can't expect them to do your job, but you sure as hell should be able to at least be able to do the majority of their job. Not probably not as well as them,
Yeah.
but in order to, be a good leader, to fully understand like what their job is and their duties, you should be able to cover down and at least, do.
Yeah. Like if your job is cleaning weapons and putting them back together and doing, like, I don't know, a functions test, and you ND and shoot through your neighbor's wall, like, you should be able to go through and do that, whoever you are. GBs,
It's been a rough
GBs,
week,
Green Beret,
for
not a
Green
good week.
Berets.
Not a,
Terrible
I,
week for Green Berets.
yeah, regiment's got history with robbing banks. They weren't caught at the bank. I don't remember. I don't think so. So, like,
No.
A+ on the execution there, except you did it in, I think, like military clothing. But yeah, the SF this week, between the guy going and pulling a Walter Kochek or Kobchek, whatever the guys from the Big
Kovchek,
Lebowski, yeah, and then the Green Beret, reportedly with the ND.
They got
Yeah, it's been a
the one colonel that's
oh
was
yeah,
up
then
here.
yeah, he was a former group commander too.
Yeah.
With the standoff with the police for 2 hours. God, the reports from that were awful. Like he kicked his wife in the face multiple times. His kids were present.
Yeah. And the
Like,
kids were like begging him not to kill their mom or something. It was pretty terrible.
that is awful. I think the shooting is awful and terrible, but something like spousal abuse, especially like that when you're a full ass grown man, 45, 46 years old, like taking out, your whatever's going on inside of your head physically on, your significant other in front of your kids, that is awful. That's disgusting. Like, it blows me away that someone with that much experience would resort to that.
I have a question that might be a little edgy, but how do you feel about when these horrific events happen, and then kind of the first reaction is to say like, oh, it's PTSD or it was like service related. How do you feel about that as like as like a reason, or you know
It pisses me off. If anyone see Pinky Blinders, what's the guy's name? Danny Whizbang. He's got shell shock from World War I. He
mhm.
stabs, a family member of the Italian mafia, and then he has to flee to London for the first series. In the first few episodes, and like that's like one of those. Okay, he legitimately has shell shock. Uh, it's really difficult for me to say people don't have PTSD. I've got some combat experience, a lot more than some, and a lot less than many more. Um, and I've never personally dealt with it. I've always looked at it like, I don't think for 99.9999% of those that have served, their combat experiences come even remotely close to what the daily soldier experienced in Vietnam, experienced in Korea when entire battalions were lost or entire companies were wiped off, the face of the earth on some desolate outpost, or in World War II when, people were storming beaches and just being laid waste by, German guns, or, a Japanese sub sinks the USS Indianapolis, and 90% of the people there drown or are eaten by sharks. Like, so for me, for that reason, it really angers me because nobody was conscripted into this service. Everyone signed up knowing that at some point you might see something awful, whether it's from the enemy or, seeing your fellow soldier ranger injured or killed. Um, but to not understand that and to go forward and then use that as a reason for poor behavior is so unprofessional. And it's like I feel like it's just this huge sign of immaturity.
Yeah, I don't think we're necessarily minimizing, the effects of PTSD or saying something terrible. But yeah, I think I would definitely agree that a lot of the times when people, get in trouble for like whether it's, I don't know, like domestic violence or, picking fights or getting into altercations, that they just claim that this was like PTSD related. It gives me a little bit pause and makes me kind of wonder because, I think there are, legitimate people who are legitimately, in bad places mentally from, war, like combat or what have you. But then when you have people that, do terrible things and then blame it on some PTS or PTSD, like that they freak out and like shoot up a bowling alley, and try and claim that they were, some that they were triggered and that caused them to shoot up a bowling alley. I don't know. If it causes me, like, it kind of cheapens the whole, like, um, the whole PTSD.
Oh, no, like I completely agree because you only see people use the PTSD card when when they're in the wrong. It's never someone before an event happens like, hey, I'm suffering from PTSD for, XYZ reasons. And, taking care of those issues going forward. It's, I ran a stoplight, I got PTSD. Oh, my fireworks went off, so I kicked my dog because it reminded me of, a rocket attack that, hit my base and landed 6 miles away from where I was, sleeping. Like, it's stuff like that that really angers me. And then the other thing with PTSD, and again, it's such it's one of the subjects I don't think you can really touch because you
Mhm.
can't ever pinpoint anyone's specific experience and say you don't have PTSD because you look like an absolute animal and like you have zero empathy. But I scored very low on my empathy test when I was at RASP 2, so it is what it is. But for a lot of these people that you hear that they have PTSD, you legitimately ask the question, what did you even see when you were deployed? And we've got people here in the United States that are civilians that claim they have PTSD from like literally anything. And you can claim you have PTSD and get like a service dog. Like I think it's the PTSD aperture is so wide now, and we're not asking, does this person really have PTSD or is this just some made up crutch that they're trying to, get something else from society? Like, I feel like you should have a standard to say, hey, no, Sergeant, you were a mechanic at CAF. You didn't get a combat badge. You don't have PTSD. You signed up for this army. You deployed. You weren't in a combat arms branch. Again, you didn't see combat. And for 9 months, you ate too much food at the DFAC and then got back and got out of the army after 3.5, 4 years. Like, those are the types of hard questions and the very narrow analysis of what I think like PTSD should be limited to, like really extreme cases, and instead of allowing everyone to get away with it almost like a get out of jail free card. Oh no, it was just PTSD. Like, that's just bullshit. It's lazy. Psychologists, psychiatrists, whoever you are, you're not doing your job, and it's to the detriment, I think, of the country because it just creates like this mentally soft, feeble country where people can't deal with their emotions in an effective way. They put a label on it, and then that prevents them from moving forward because, oh no, I've just got this. I don't have to work on it because society acknowledges it, and I'm giving like I get a free pass at some point in the future when I misbehave.
Yeah. I mean, like, on the one end spectrum, like, I do think that there is definitely, place for PTSD, but at the same time, though, I do think that it's gotten to the point where it's like you said, it's like an untouchable subject where people are scared to touch this issue because, for fear of sounding like anti-veteran or fear of sounding like not sensitive to other people's thoughts and emotions. But it's like, where do you draw the line, and like where do you draw, where do you tell someone like, hey, like, yeah, like you probably, it wasn't that bad, but you just kind of need to deal with it and move on, versus like you actually need, I don't know. It's like,
I think you could clean this up real quickly in the military. One, did you deploy to a combat zone? Okay, that's like a pretty low threshold of entry. Two, did you see combat? Uh, and then that's where you look at like the CIB and the CAB now, because those awards have been drastically watered down. There are times where if a rocket attack happens at Bagram, I think like a brigade commander tried to give the entire brigade that was at Bagram a combat award, even though it landed and didn't impact or injure a single person. Or like there was something, I think in 2013 or 14 when I was deployed, there was like a pop shot over some random fob, maybe Taranco or something, and somebody put in the unit for a CAB because they were directly fired upon on the enemy. It's like, okay, well, like that goes back to, should combat badges be awarded only if you return fire, only if you maneuver, or if you just stood there and you some round landed closely to you? And we bring up, this is why you can't talk about it, because individuals have been killed by random shots that got over a wire. Individuals have been killed by the missile or the mortar round that hits Bagram or Calf. But those make up, like, I would wager 0.001% of all combat fatalities. And so just because it happened in one instance for like some statistical anomaly, essentially, given how large the bases are and just the randomness of some of these rockets and mortar attacks, maybe say, okay, if you got indirect fire and you weren't injured, nobody was injured, you weren't close to being injured, like that shouldn't suffice to warrant a PTSD claim either, because it was so infrequent for you that you couldn't really think that it was going to happen day in, day out, like some shell-shocked veteran from World War II battle, of the Bulge. Like, so I think people need to sit back and say, okay, it might have sucked for me in this one instance, but I look at Dick Winters. Did I even come close to what he went through? And should I be suffering from the same emotional or mental ailment that he clearly probably suffered from, but he compartmentalized it and clearly didn't go shooting up a bowling alley in the middle of, Pennsylvania?
yeah, I mean, like, if I remember from like med school and like learning about PTSD, it's like, I believe it's more something to do with like it's like how much anxiety that you feel, and then you link that anxiety or fear with like everyday emotions or something like that. So, theoretically, you could claim that you have like PTSD from being mortared because that was a very high anxiety or fear provoking event that becomes linked with like normal day events. But I don't know, it's like, I think that we perhaps are a little too cavalier in issuing out these diagnoses, and maybe veterans are also a little bit to blame with seeking out these diagnoses for getting um, that disability for check.
Oh yeah,
And I think
yeah.
that while a lot of people probably do suffer from PTSD from being in the military, may or may not be combat related. Because I for sure probably have a little bit of PTS from like almost dying on like a train jump at MLAT. Um, but it doesn't necessarily affect my day to day life. It only affects me like if I smell like if I go on like a tarmac and smell like the jet fuel, I
Oh
get
yeah.
like real anxiety, like real anxious, and my heart starts racing. Something like that, like I can buy. Like you don't necessarily need to go into combat, but with any severe anxiety producing or fear producing event, it can definitely be cause some PTS. But at the same time, though, like I think we definitely, as a whole, between like the country and as veterans, kind of cheapen the diagnosis of PTSD when veterans or people trying to get out of the military try to claim PTSD as a easy handout for the government, and then going on and use that as an excuse for
Yeah, isn't it like
not.
10? It's like 10 or 30%. Like it's something. It's not insignificant, and it's, for everyone that's ETS, when you go through the checklist, like they ask for PTSD multiple times, And I never put down that I had PTSD because I don't. Um, but it was one of those things that they can't really check. It's like, oh, I've got pain in my lower back. There was literally no test for that to get like an automatic 10% for an individual.
Hmm.
Can you touch your toes? Yeah. Does it cause you some pain? A little. Is that a flexibility issue? Oh no, it must be from wearing kit for years on end. Oh, but you are on staff. You never put your plate carrier on. Doesn't matter. Like, here's your 10%. And so now you're like oh, one more event, and now you're a disabled veteran at 20%. So I think, it- I feel like a lot of things in the Army have been really watered down. And when individuals do real gallant acts that cause an emotional response in the future, it cheapens their experiences because individuals are weary to trust whether or not this person really has PTSD, or they're like, that 28-year-old major who's on their first deployment who heard about a mortar attack and then goes back and beats the shit out of his wife and claims, oh no, it was PTSD because fob got mortared and I was in Afghanistan. It's a war zone. And you're like, no, 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 no. That's not how it works.
Hmm. And that's like, I think the point that we're not trying to diminish, I think, like PTSD or people that are, have mental or emotional issues suffering from like traumatic events. But I think as a whole, with the military and how kind of things have been treated, I think that veterans, kind of the whole concept of having PTSD becomes watered down, and it becomes like a blanket get out of jail free card that veterans try to pull. Just if you have any military service, it's like you're almost qualified to pull the PTSD card just if you have military service.
Yeah, and because less and less of America has served, compared to our past, and the connections that we have as American citizens to individuals that have served has lessened from Vietnam onward. It's gotten to the point where everyone gets thanked for their service, and now everyone assumes that if you claim something from your service, whether you just went to Afghanistan or Iraq, everyone automatically thinks that A, you were at like Tora Bora, B, you killed bin Laden, and C, you had to have been IED and rocketed every damn day of your deployment, which could not be further from the case for 99.9% of all deployed personnel. I'm like, and I say that with utter confidence, having deployed multiple times and seeing, oh, we talk about like fraud, waste, and abuse. Like, this is, everyone wants that $2,000 stimulus check or that $600 stimulus check. And people are like, oh my God, that's so much money, whether you're on a Republican or a Democrat. Like, why are we just handing out free money? It's like, we should be looking at the military and saying the same damn thing. Like, how many people have we sent to CAF that never leave CAF, that really don't have a function except their unit went to Afghanistan and they got 9 months of tax-free payment plus hazard duty pay? Like, the billions and trillions of dollars we've wasted on contractors to go do jobs that military individuals should be performing in Afghanistan. That recent article that came out that said, like, we're spending like $1 billion a year on obesity in the military because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and space guardians are too fat. Like, that's the kind of stuff where even now you look back at the PTSD thing we just talked about, Evan, how many payments are going out from the VA for this kind of stuff. It's just like, it's awful. Like, we waste so much money as a military force, and like, I feel like everything is interconnected when you drop standards in some areas. And then we can bring this back to the discipline discussion we had as a leader. Like, if you're not performing at a high level, that's going to have reverberating consequences in some other line, in some other relationship. Like, everything can be connected here.
This is true. I think, the bottom line is you need to be the best version of yourself possible. And
Yeah.
you should hold yourself to that standard. And when you aren't holding yourself to a high standard, you just cheapen the experience for everybody around you, and ultimately let down those around you.
Yeah. And the last word I guess we can probably say on the PTSD thing, if you are really struggling with PTSD, like, please do not take the conversation that we've just had as, an affront to your experiences. Um, we're bringing this up because I think it's a worthwhile conversation. If you have PTSD, individuals that probably claim to have PTSD that have not been through, a percentage of your experience, and are probably, getting the benefit of something that, you truly suffer from. If you need help or need to seek out help, Operation RSF is a great resource. They're bringing the community together. A couple guys from group founded it. Reach out to them if you want to talk. There's a ton of hotlines. I guess we can probably throw one in the podcast link below. But there is a resource for you out there. But if you're out there and you're considering whether or not your experiences were validated through your service, and this is just like another way that you can get something from Uncle Sam, you really need to reevaluate and see what that does to cheapen the pain that others are experiencing.
Yeah, I know we've talked about this before in the past about like one of my biggest pet peeves is when guys, when they get when they get out of the military, they try to, when they go for that separation, like physical, where they try and pull as many things or as many service related injuries as possible to try and max out that disability check. But, it was never, like, do you really think that you deserve 100% disability because you're just fat and you have back problems, whereas you have guys that get blown up in Afghanistan and Iraq, guys are missing arms and legs, don't even qualify for 100% disability. I think that's
still
such,
go back out and go on the next mission too. Like they're not
yeah.
done. They've volunteered to go back as amputees.
And it's just like that's what drives me like insane and kind of nuts, that people that one have like never deployed but then try and claim like all these service related injuries, and they compare and contrast that with guys and gals who have gone overseas that haven't blown up, that haven't shot, that don't even qualify for 20% disability even though they're have Purple Hearts. Yet we're as a system systematically like allowing these subpar, like shitty soldiers to get away with claiming 100% disability on just being just fat and out of shape, and that just drives me nuts.
Erectile dysfunction, like that, for men out there, that's like the easiest thing that you can claim when you're ETSing for, I think, what is it? I think it's 30% maybe. I'd have to look it up, but I remember hearing soldiers talking about gaming the system. Sleep apnea. There's a captain that got out at Fort Carson. I'm not going to name him. There's very few people that probably listen that know who I'm talking about. This dude got fat, like never deployed, was like Space Force or something. I think I remember, got fat and got fatter when he was getting out in order to make his claim more viable that he had sleep apnea. I don't think he ever uses a sleep apnea machine. He just got fat eating McDonald's every day. Yet the Army's paying him like a 50% disability rating because of his poor performance and poor standards, for himself when he was in. So that goes back to like, where was his leader? Where's that major that was in charge of him, or that lieutenant colonel saying, hey, dude, you're getting fat. Like, it's embarrassing. Like, you're getting out. I haven't seen you in 6 months. He gamed the system at his unit so where he wasn't showing up because neither one of his bosses knew who he was supposed to report to. And so for the 6 months leading up to it, he just didn't go to work. So like, that's the kind of stuff that drives me up the wall, because you see the long wait times that we've had in the VA for people to try to get in and actually get seen. Those individuals that probably are suffering from PTSD or have some actual physical ailment from being shot, blown up, and they can't, because the VA is constantly dealing with paperwork from assholes that don't take care of themselves and have the individual discipline while they're in the military, and then make claims for their own personal failures and make it the responsibility of the taxpayer to pay them for the rest of their life because of their laziness. Like, it's probably the most frustrating thing I've ever seen, beyond just like soldiers signing up thinking that Uncle Sam owes them anything. It's like a privilege to serve. You weren't owed anything except in, like, I think really explicit, very narrow circumstances, what Bobby and I have kind of droned on about here, like blown up, shot, going through something serious. If I busted my knee on a jump, that sucks. I volunteered for that. Like, I was not forced to jump out of the fucking plane. You volunteered. If you were running as a civilian and you were working at like a law firm here, the law firm is not going to pay you for the rest of your life because you decided to stay fit. Like, that's just life. So the Army is very forgiving when it comes to stupidity that individuals, execute on their own individual basis. but it's just awful that the taxpayer is now responsible for it going forward.
Exactly. I don't know if I keep beating that dead horse, but at the end of the day,
That dead horse probably has 70% disability.
yeah. That's like, I'm all for guys getting, compensated for, things that are legitimate, but it's just, when you have the guys who have literally done nothing and haven't earned anything and feel like they are owed by the government, they're owed taxpayer dollars because they signed up and volunteered for service. It's just like, I think, maybe that's just a product of today's society and culture where we just expect, or people just expect to be given things and expect to not have to work hard for anything. We just expect to be taken care of for, for doing something. Maybe that's
Bobby.
What's that?
I blame this on Outback Steakhouse, TGIF, is Panera, whoever gives the most discounts on Veterans Day. They started all this. They started this 20 years ago when you went and got a free meal, and then all of a sudden that just started seeping into everywhere else in the military. So now everyone understands that beyond just Veterans Day, I should be getting these same great discounts from everyone as a veteran. Like, thank me for my service on a day basis. And not only do I need to be thanked by civilians, I need to be thanked by the Army. The Army owes me for having volunteered.
Yeah, I think the pendulum has just swung so far back in the opposite direction that it's kind of almost sickening, especially, you talk about when I see like, NFL football games and you see like the random service member that's honored on TV, and it's just like, I think it's a good thing that we do that, but like it's kind of, it's almost kind of,
we're paying for it.
It's kind of sickening how
flyovers. Like, that's stupid. Like, hey, Jerry Jones, you should be coughing up money to have individuals from Fort Bliss or Fort Hood come down to do whatever part of the anthem you want to claim with that Brett Favre hand over your heart, not taking your baseball cap off, you asshole. Like, the military shouldn't be paying $2 to $3 million to have that experience. And I'm an Eagles fan, so again, if there's something I hate more than the Cowboys, I need to figure it out. But the Cowboys are at the top of the list, and so is Jerry Jones. Worst GM, I think, in football in the last 25 years, if I'm also correct. I think he has the worst record of any team, and I'm pretty sure are the Cowboys losing right now?
I don't know, I haven't checked yet.
Yeah. Okay, so Lululemon's on the shit list because 10,000 is so much better. The Dallas Cowboys are always on the shit list. I know we have some Cowboy fans out there. So you can go ahead and unfollow us because I hate the Cowboys so much. Like, you are not going to be missed. Like, you and that awful team. The only thing that's come out of Dallas that's been good is Tony Romo as a broadcaster after he was a subpar quarterback who can't hold a fucking field goal kick. Like, enjoy the postseason. Guess who's won the Super Bowl in the last 20 years? EAGLES. Eagles. That's who, baby. Fuck you, Dallas.
I think we'll probably, you want to wrap it at that. I don't know how much more.
Oh yeah, Giants won. So Cowboys, congratulations. You're not making the postseason again. All you had to do was win this game, and you didn't. You could not beat the Giants.
Eagles couldn't either, though, at the same time.
Well, who cares? We knew the Eagles sucked this year. I mean, we got a Super Bowl, man. I don't care if they suck for another 20 years. Like,
we got one.
Like, congratulations, just because, you know another reason why I hate the Cowboys? Troy Aikman and Joe Buck are by far some of the worst commentators that are out there. Troy Aikman just, like, sits up there, and Joe Buck is just, like, if Troy Aikman was a cow, Joe Buck would get so much milk out of him from just, oh, my God, remember that, Troy? Let me show you a previous game clip of you and Emmitt Smith being good back in 1925 when football was still up and coming. Like, Joe Buck, thank you for adding zero value to this conversation because you've never played sports. You hate Philadelphia. That's completely apparent. I remember so many games where you just like wrote off Jonathan McNabb when the Eagles were making the NFC Championship game every single year. Whenever the Phillies are playing, oh yeah, they won a World Series. Like, fuck you, Dallas. I think we should end on that.
Yeah, it's like kind of a little bit negative podcast at some points. We're kind of,
Wonder Woman started it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe a little harsh on some things, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of it stems from the fact that, we hold ourselves to such a high standard, and we kind of expect and would hope that people would hold themselves to such a high standard. But I think you and I both understand, and we all understand that in today's age, in today's society, in today's America, that's few and far between of people that are one, disciplined enough to hold themselves to a high standard, and two, motivated and willing to hold themselves to such a high standard and hold others around them to such a high standard. So while we might be a little harsh and a little bit maybe a little riding on certain aspects of a lot of things in life and society, I think at the end of the day, we just want to see this country and its military do better and be better.
Yeah, and like Bobby said, we complained in this podcast for sure, but like I hope that we've established enough of a rapport so that individuals know that like we saw a problem with fitness in the Army. We started Cronus Fit to address that issue. Like, don't just be an individual that spots a problem and does nothing about it. If you're listening to this podcast, and again, you find that we are completely off basis, unless you're a Dallas Cowboys fan, I don't care. Like, hit us up. I mean, we had a question and answer thing yesterday or 2 days ago about civil affairs. Like, I voiced my opinion on what civil affairs and infantry branch don't have in common. But yet I still acknowledge that there is a role for civil affairs in the military, and we still let individuals, voice those opinions and share those opinions, because if someone wants to serve in the capacity that they can to the best of their ability and like go and join that branch, although I would not, like, I'm not going to shit on someone's dreams or someone's motivation and drive. So if you see a problem, do something to address it, but just don't be a person that rambles on about being angry about something and then that's where it stops. Like, be the change you want to see, be somebody, go out and make the world in the image that you think is best, and just don't sit in your basement on Reddit. Like, that's the worst.
All right. I think we'll wrap it at that. Any other last closing comments, Sean?
Cronus Fit 15 on 10,000 if you want some awesome swag. Absolutely love their stuff.
And I guess we'll end it with that. We'll catch you guys next time.
Peace.
Later.